Well, welcome, John. So great to have you here. How are you today?
Just great. Just great. It's a little bit after April 15th. From a tax point of view, it's a happy time for a CPA.
That's right. That's right. Hope you're getting a little R&R after that.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep.
Good. I could not be more thrilled for this episode. During our prep call, the information that you were giving me was just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So for all of our listeners who are listening in, definitely grab a pen and paper, because the information that John is going to give us is so critical. If you have children that you need to put through college, or if you know people who are thinking about putting children through college, or whoever it is, friends, nieces and nephews, it doesn't matter. This podcast is for you. This episode is for you today. And John is going to share so much great stuff. So I just want to dive in because that's how excited I am. But let's start with John telling us about the work that you do. Tell us what you do to help your clients every day.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the college side of things, what we're really trying to help people do is, or recognize that this is one of the largest things they're ever going to buy. And as such, it's important to have a strategy or a plan to do that rather than just, step into the process and hope that it'll all come out okay. So really, for the folks who come and see us on this is what we try to do, is help them organize their college funding into a way that'll allow them to have maybe $1 or $2 to retire on one day.
I love that. So knowing that college is one of the largest things, or the largest thing you're ever going to buy, you help folks fund that investment.
And yeah, not only from the, savings point of view. Yeah, it's great when we run into folks who maybe have a 2 or a 3-year-old and say they've got 15 years to go before college comes. But oftentimes people tend to go more into crisis mode somewhere around age 16 or 17 of their kids. And they, see that light in the tunnel of the oncoming train. That's really where we try to help people take control of that process.
I'm just curious from your perspective, because you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah. Close to 15 years now.
Yeah. So I'm sure you have seen a lot of different situations. I know you and I have known each other all that time. And I know you worked with hundreds, it's safe to say, hundreds of families, if not more, through this process. So you've seen the gamut.
Oh, there's some horror stories, that you see, people who've gotten themselves into some significant amount of debt, spent down assets that they thought they were going to be using for other things.
Sure.
Yeah, it's sometimes pretty scary to see what you see out there. But part of what we do, is try to help people strategize and work their way through that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm just curious from your perspective, why is it that people do wait? And I'll even admit, I'll use myself as the example. I have young children, still grammar school age.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I know that college is coming, but I also still look at it as a ways away, right? Is that the normal thought process? It's just hard to visualize.
Yeah, I think people recognize early on that, they probably do need to save something for college.
Yeah.
But then there's also a ton of other things tugging at their sleeves. They've got to save for retirement. And of course, kids have all these, let's call them enrichment activities that they have to pay for. And I'm not sure who they're enriching, but bottom line is that they do have all this money that they need to spend in order to get their child ready for maybe a future in college one day. Yeah. But the savings tend to take a back seat sometimes.
Totally. And I think it's also hard. Like, I cannot envision my 8-year-old as an 18-year-old. That's something so hard to visualize for me, being out on her own. So I would imagine, to your point, just so many things step in the way. And you just think you have so much time.
Right.
But the work you do proves that we really don't. And that time comes quickly.
Yeah. And there's also, when you get into those teen years, there's a lot of research out there that says that we as parents spend the most money we ever spend during our kids' teenage years. And then that leaks over into the college years as well. So there's not a lot of extra money around to set aside. And no one ever saves the whole cost of college. I've been doing a financial plan work for 35 years. the number of people who have saved the cost of their entire, the kids' education, I could count on one hand.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's good to know, because I think sometimes, you think that's where you need to go.
Yeah. Yeah. No one ever gets there.
Now, you have a really unique skill set, and I didn't really know how unique it was until, we started to talk really deep about this. Mm-hmm. But tell me how what you do either complements or differs from what people traditionally think of when they think of college planning. Can you just separate that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, if we just brought up that term, most people would put it into one of two categories. Either number one, we're helping people figure out how to get into the right college, mm-hmm. or we're helping people save for college. Okay. And what we do that is a little different is to, number one, make them aware of how the college's side of the equation works, how they provide whatever financial aid they're able to provide, mm-hmm. what forms it takes, looking out for little tripwires along the way about mm-hmm. how certain scholarships or grants might work, how to navigate the student loan process, because nearly everybody borrows something mm-hmm. to help pay for college, but they don't necessarily know all the facets of how those loan paybacks work. Mm-hmm. So we help them with those things as well. That's kind of a brief summary of some of the things that we help people cover.
Mm-hmm. Versus, and I know that you do work with your clients this way, but the traditional route of setting up a 529 mm-hmm. or some sort of savings vehicle, mm-hmm. that grandparents like to start for their kids, or that parents start for their kids when they're born. What we're talking about today is more of, you have a child who's in, mid high school, a senior in high school, and that time is here.
Yeah.
How do you move forward?
Yeah. And we help them know how the financial aid form, most people know it as something called a FAFSA form. We help them understand what they're filling out and how it's interpreted at the other end, so that they can then, if there's time for them to adjust their affairs to make themselves appear that they have more need, there are ways to do that. But if you're waiting until your child's like a senior in high school, it becomes a lot harder.
Yeah. And that's what I love, is that you are going to share the college's perspective on mm-hmm. all of this, which is a really great learning point that a lot of people don't get or don't take into consideration. And when we were talking, like I said, my kids are younger, but I never even imagined that I could take control of this process as much as you educated me. So I'm excited to dive into that. But before we do, still, again, this is really unique. Not a lot of people focus on this part of the college funding process, this part of the college planning. How did you get here? What brought you to this point where you do really focus on helping clients through this part?
Well, in my situation, it was seeing the process for myself and my own kids, having them work through this process, filling out my own FAFSA forms, and then seeing kind of what a crazy process it was. And then studying more and more about how the colleges do what they do as far as financial aid, and clearly recognizing that, this was something that parents would need help with. The first important conclusion I came to on all this is that this is the only thing that we buy as consumers. This is the only thing that we buy where we have to tell the seller basically everything about our finances before they tell us how much we're going to pay. And when you fill out the FAFSA form, all the information that's on your tax return, all the information that you fill out on this form itself, the school gets a copy of it. So they have a pretty full picture of what your finances are, so that they can establish a price point for you. I can't think of anything else where we buy anything, and certainly not a car, and to a certain extent, not even a house where we do that.
That is amazing to me, because I feel like the average consumer, you go on the website, you look at the tuition costs, and you're like, oh, I can't afford that, or, oh gosh, I can't afford that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, over 80% of people don't pay that retail price that you're talking about on the website. It's usually something less, whether it's brought down by some need-based aid that you're offered, or by some amount of merit aid, or something else, which I'm sure we'll talk about, something else called a tuition discount. All those things can come into play that will help bring that cost of college down. But the initial number, which for many schools right now is in the 70s and 80,000s, is, that's enough to scare anybody.
Yes, definitely. And when I think about my children and what I should be saving, that's what I see out there. And, makes my heart skip a few beats there.
Yeah, because you say,
times three.
You're never going to you'll feel like that's like an insurmountable mountain that you're trying to climb.
Yeah, it's really discouraging. And for parents, I would imagine college is just a huge point of pride. The amount of value that you put on education and money, and those two things are kind of coming together when you have to decide where you want to send your child or where they want to go.
Yeah. There's a ton of emotional factors that go into this, which are hard to overcome, on a practical sense. We all many of us have been fortunate enough to be able to go to college when we were younger. Number one, we want our kids to share that experience of going to college just because we know what it meant to us. We feel this overriding need to have our child's life be better than our own. And college we view as one of those tickets to get there. So we have all those types of things working on us, never mind how much crazy in love we are with our kids.
Yes.
That we want them to have this wonderful life. So spending more money on a college seems to be the way to make sense to do that.
Yes. Now, John, you and your team, you deliver workshops on this topic.
Oh, yeah. Over 36 of them every fall, generally. Most of them in high schools in the general area. Yeah.
Yep. That is unbelievable. Tell us about who does come to those workshops, who should be coming to those workshops, who should really pay attention when listening to this podcast. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Typically, the parents who come to this are parents of juniors and seniors. What we would like to have happen more and more is that people who are parents of freshmen and sophomores come, because they have a greater opportunity to be able to prepare their financial situation so that, whatever aid there is out there, they can qualify for more readily.
Okay. So right now you mostly get parents of juniors and seniors. And at that point, your kind of financial picture is what it is.
Yeah. Number one, plus the other part that's going on is getting back to the emotional side. You've already been out to probably visit some schools. Your child has spent a lot of time using tools at the school counselor's office, something like a tool called Naviance, which is a tool that many high school counselors have in their quiver of arrows that help them figure out what's the best match. So bottom line is the kids have had a fair amount of time to fall in love with the school. And as such, you're already well into the process of maybe narrowing down a list to a couple of special places that it would be difficult to have your child be talked out of.
Got it.
In case the financial part was out of reach.
Out of reach. Yep. So like anything. So when a family comes to you with a junior or senior who potentially, as they normally do in high school, they helped your child maybe narrow down schools based on likes, based on wants. And then you go and visit those schools because that's what parents do usually in the summer between junior and senior year. They come to you already have falling in love with a specific college or university. Right, and then it's like, okay, now we need to make this work no matter how. Yeah. They don't want to disappoint their child and they want to take them, bring them to the school of their choice.
There's a lot of dynamics on that side too. Number one, you don't want to have to tell your child that, I've been telling you all my life that if you work hard, you can always achieve your dreams. Yes. And then on the other side, tell them that, oh, by the way, I really didn't save all that much money for this. And now we can't really.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah. How can you do that to your kids?
I can't even stomach it thinking about doing that. It's hard.
So the goal there is to try to maybe have the conversation earlier on, which is why attending the workshop-y type things earlier on would be a better
Yeah.
way to be able to help prepare for a discussion with your child about the money part.
Yeah. And you mentioned, so ideally people, you would love it if families came that freshman, sophomore year,
Mhm.
but you even mentioned that you're contemplating talking to parents of middle schoolers.
Yeah, one of the things that we're planning to roll out in the fall is to get out to talk to middle school parents through some sort of college venue that they might offer, so that we can start to have them at least think about how that system works.
Yes.
So that they can be prepared for it and, use whatever savings that they do have in the best possible way.
Yeah. And to what you said yesterday, make any changes.
Yeah.
So that by the time the 4 years goes by of high school, they can make any adjustments or changes. So when they do have to fill out that form, it's conscious.
Yes.
Versus kind of reactive to wherever they are in that moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right.
No, you're absolutely right.
And that immediately right there puts you in a position of power, right? Any type of planning makes you feel more powerful and more confident.
Mm-hmm,
So when you're going into a large decision and investment like this, proper planning will just make everybody feel better about
Absolutely. And most people do look on it as an investment. It's interesting you use that word, because they are looking at this cost of college, if you will, as something that will have and what we call in the financial world an ROI, a return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
They're hoping that by virtue of spending $150,000 over 4 years, that will translate to several times that in future earning power.
Yes. And I think when you go back to maybe a little bit being reactive, parents kind of reacting to their child's wishes, but having the conversation of what is that ROI? So if your child wants to go to an expensive school, whatever that definition is to anybody, but their major or the profession that they want to go in won't warrant compensation that will follow that investment or that will make up for that investment, that should be a factor, or that should be part of the conversation.
It should be. Interesting that you brought that up. That's one of the reasons. Another one of the reasons I got started in this was going to a meeting with some students back in the early 2000s at a local college. The CPA Society asked me to come in and speak to some students about post-college life. So I had a group of 12 young ladies sitting around me, and I asked them, I said, well, how are you going to deal with the student loans that are going to come from what you have? I says, well, do you all have student loans? And they all raised their hands. Mm-hmm. And I asked, can you give me some sense of what those loans are? And had one young lady who, and this is almost 20 years ago, told me that she already had $90,000 worth of loans.
Oh my God.
And I asked her, I says, well, how are you planning to deal with that after you graduate? And I asked her, what do you think your occupation is going to be? She says, well, I don't really know. I'm a Latin American history major. And I says, wow, how is she going to be able to monetize that in some way? Maybe in some work in diplomacy or something in that. But, those are the type of boxes that people build around themselves that are hard to get out of.
Yeah. And that sounds like an important conversation. And that's an uncomfortable question you had to ask.
Oh, yeah.
Right. What is your plan for when you get out of school with X amount of loans?
Yeah.
And it's probably a question that we don't ask our children enough, or we don't have that conversation.
Well, they may not be necessarily ready to have totally a response of, how am I going to deal with a monthly payment of $900 a month 5 years from now?
Yes.
Nobody's going to really know that, but
Fair.
they, just to give some significance to the size and say, look, this is going to take a lot of money to solve. We at least should have some strategy on how it's going to work.
Yeah. And that's what I'm getting at of the first part of this conversation, is that the money part of college seems to be kind of last on the list to discuss and strategize over.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how much money people spend on the admissions side.
Yes.
There are people who make a huge business out of getting your child into the perfect college. It's not unusual to see people pay fees of $10, $20, $30, $50,000 to find that consultant that's going to get them into the place that could be that perfect place that's going to make their life just, sunshine and rainbows.
Yes. but then thinking through it past the experience, thinking of this side of the equation.
Yeah.
How you're going to fund it or how possibly your child is going to fund it.
Exactly.
That is just outstanding. So let's jump in, and why don't you tell us the things we need to know, or the things that parents, aunts and uncles, grandparents, what do we need to know in order to maximize any type of financial aid package, or to help us take control over this part of the college planning process? Okay. And I know you talk about this in your workshops.
Yeah, there are several facets to it. Number one, certainly be aware of how the financial planning process works. Like, how does the FAFSA work? When do you need to put it in? Recognize that they're going to be asking information about your income and your assets, as well as the student's income and assets, if they have any. And there are ways where you can kind of pre-trial those numbers ahead of time using calculators online that both the Department of Education and the College Board have on their websites. Okay. So that way you can kind of get a feel and say, look, if my kid is going to look at a private school and maybe those typically cost retail $70,000 or so, and this little calculator says that my expected family contribution is going to be 20 or 25, then you can say, well, I'm probably going to be a need-based aid candidate for something. Okay. So that's a way to kind of get started on the need-based aid side. Also, every school's website, as you get a little closer and you have some specific schools in mind, every school has on their website something called a net price calculator, where you can actually get kind of a little bit more specific ballpark number about what that school might end up costing, both based on your finances and also your academics, because they will typically ask questions like, what's your grade point average? What's your class rank? How'd you do on your SATs? And then make some guesses if they can offer merit aid, what that could be. So again, no one will guarantee that that's the perfect number, but it should give you something to work with. So those are a few things that you need to get started, but also to be aware of how other things can help you. Like, also be aware that there are resources out there. Probably the one I use the most is something called collegedata.com. And it gives you a great sense of what the schools, not only their admissions policies are, like, what SAT scores are the typical student having, but also on the financial side, what is the typical amount of aid that a incoming student might get, not only from a need-based side, but also on the merit or tuition discount side. Let me describe tuition discounting a little bit more in detail,
it's very interesting.
Yeah. Here, tuition discounting is a practice that many colleges utilize as a way of recruiting students that involves a fair amount of marketing. All right. They start out, many of them, with a high retail price of their college, because they recognize that you and I, when we see something that looks very expensive, we oftentimes associate a high degree of value with it. So you automatically make some judgment, whether you know it or not, that this school must be a pretty good school.
Sure. And when you talk retail price, like, it's on the website, it's in a brochure, it's what we see, what the average consumer sees.
It's what we see. Exactly right. That's the stuff. When you open up the website, they'll say, this is the room and board,
Got it.
This is, this is all in, this is the nice meal plan.
Got it.
All that stuff.
Got it.
Okay. So then how they market this to you is they say, look, please fill out the financial aid forms, and then we'll get back to you with a financial aid offer letter, assuming that your child is admitted. So when that letter comes, assuming that your child is admitted, it might come back saying, well, congratulations. Not only is your child admitted, but we're going to offer them, let's say, the presidential scholarship or the dean's scholarship. And instead of our total retail price being $70, of which $50 of it is tuition, we're going to give you half off on the tuition. So, now because your child, got this special scholarship. All right. So now you're looking at it as, gee, this school's only going to cost me 45, only 45.
Yeah.
All right.
Feel like you got a huge discount.
Yeah. It's, like buying things on sale, which we all love.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this time it involves our kids.
Sure.
And their future. And, if we don't sign our kids up for this, we'll feel like a fool and our kids will probably hate us forever.
And I would imagine they make you feel so amazing because they gave your child this scholarship.
Oh, yeah.
So right off the bat, I would imagine I would be like, oh, my God, well, of course, you got a scholarship here. Like, they value you as a student.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes great cocktail party talk.
Yes. Think of the bragging rights. My goodness.
Yes. My kid got $100,000 scholarship over 4 years.
Yes.
There's just huge value in that.
Yes. Yes.
So, but what has happened there is that you're attracted by the cachet of having this wonderful scholarship, as you said. The school really only wanted $45,000 anyway, even though they said that their price was $70, but their average revenue per student might be somewhere in the low 40s. So, and databases like collegedata.com will give you some feedback into this as to what you can expect at a lot of schools. So it's a resource that anybody can use. You don't have to, other than giving up your email address and maybe tolerating some junk email for a while, you're going to have access to a database that can really help you.
That can really help you understand, let's just call it the sale price or the discounted price.
Yes.
What the average student pays to go to the school versus what that retail price is.
Yeah. Yeah.
John, does the average parent know about this?
Oh, no. Most of them just kind of look at the retail price and they just go, wow. After the tears stop, they would then, kind of say, well, geez, is it worth applying at all? And it generally is.
Yes.
Okay. And it really depends on which school you're talking to. There's a group of schools that we all recognize as the fancy brand names, the Ivy, almost Ivy type schools. Mm-hmm. And they do, in fact, have a lot of money to help people come, assuming you can meet the academic requirements. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be primarily need-based. They are not going to come in with any of the discounting.
No.
Okay. Because they don't have to. They already have, they already turned down 95% of the inbound people. Okay. But then there's this other, let's say the next level of college that isn't in that rarefied air of the Ivy, almost Ivies. And they're doing this discounting all the time. Now, I used in my example 50% as a discount. And a lot of people say, wow, that's a lot. Well, the average discount rate just got published this morning from the colleges across the country, from the Business Officer Association. Mm-hmm. The average for the schools that do this, the average discount rate on tuition is 56%.
Oh, wow.
So this is a big number. Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of parents, to answer your original question, most parents aren't aware of this.
Oh, well, I hope everybody who was listening really paid attention and you share this information, because that is a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
It could be a huge amount of money you could save.
Right.
Just by not doing a little bit of homework, having kind of those ducks in a row. And that's where the planning process comes in again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a partly planning, partly school selection.
Yeah.
But mostly being aware of other resources out there that can help you.
Now, John, you also mentioned merit aid.
Yeah. I mean, there are many schools that do, in fact, help with merit aid, and they certainly take into account things like, as I mentioned before, in the net price calculator, class rank or SAT scores, although that's becoming a little bit less common these days because as a result of COVID, many schools kind of went test optional on their SATs, where they don't really require somebody to submit SAT scores. What ends up happening is that the people who have the good SAT scores submit them anyway. And the people who don't. Okay. But it is could be one of the factors that go into merit aid, as well as athletics. That can certainly play a part.
So merit, not to interrupt you, but just for people who don't know, merit aid is when you're getting, you're getting money based on any type of merit. It could be academic, it could be sports.
Yeah, it could be a special skill that you have. As an example, when my son went to University of Delaware, he used to be part of the local high school marching band. And when he went to Delaware, they said, do you want to be part of our marching band? He says, sure. And they said, okay, great. Here's $2,500 a year because we know that that's going to be extra work for you.
Oh, nice.
And so that's a form of special skill.
Got it.
Another merit aid, although it's not quite merit, it could be geographic. Let's say your child, like some children want to go to college as far away from you as possible. Okay. And they want to look at a school out in Idaho. Okay. There might be some school in Idaho that says, we don't really get a lot of kids from Connecticut. In order to round out our population and try to get a diverse group, maybe we can offer them a little bit more money to be willing to make the trip. That could be a form of merit aid. And there could be any other ethnic or demographic characteristics that could go into other types of merit aid as well.
Got it. Now, is this something the college recognizes and offers, or do parents have to bring that to the attention of the school?
Hopefully the college would recognize that. But when it comes to the parent's ability to bring that to the person's attention, they can absolutely do that too. Again, this is another way of helping them empower themselves in this process. Because just because the school comes up with an aid offer doesn't mean you have to live with what it was.
Okay.
You do have the ability to, I don't want to use the word negotiate because schools don't like the word negotiate.
Of course.
You can come back to them with some suggestions as to why they maybe should increase their offer, but that could take a number of different tacks. It could be things like having offers from other schools. It could be family circumstances that have changed. It could be a number of things.
And this is one thing that, again, another point I found fascinating. And I agree about the word negotiation. That makes everybody feel a little off.
Sounds a little used car-like.
Yes. But you do mention that you could enhance your position, right? You are not powerless. So when a school presents an offer, you can come back, right? And offer additional information or explain your situation, or even, talk about an offer you got at another school,
right?
If possible.
Yeah.
Right.
In that circumstance, let's say if they've got a school that they view as a competitor, somebody who they view as kind of on the same playing field as them, and you have received an offer that is bringing your net price there to be lower than maybe your number one goal school. There's nothing preventing you from following the school's process to put in an appeal for that. Now, I'll give you an example of something that I just ran into the other day where a parent was telling me that they went to the admitted students gathering at a college that their child was interested in. And there was some people attending the workshop that was going to be told to them about what it's like to come to the school. But there was a huge line outside the financial aid office of everybody who wanted to get there and say, I need more money. But in reality, the process that you should follow is often of something you do in writing. It's a very formal process.
Got it.
And it's not something you could just wander in and yell and scream and say, give me more money, or I don't know what I'm going to do.
Sure. You had mentioned too, make friends, get to know the folks in the financial aid office, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah. And again, it's not in a situation where by making a buddy there that they're going to give you more money just because you become their new best friend.
Of course.
It's really something about having someone who can help explain things to you and having a name behind it, because they'll be able to tell you, whether there's perhaps any special scholarships that might be someone who might be a nursing major, let's say, or whether there are, some special loans that you might qualify for that are unique to either that school or maybe a certain major. All those things can be gathered by having someone who at that specific school. So we always recommend making a friend in the financial aid office for just that reason.
That's great advice. Does it ever happen where people confuse an aid with a loan and they think they're getting free money, but that's not the case.
Oh,
Do you ever come across that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That happens all the time in the fact that these letters that we all get if we're getting financial aid offered to us, they're not standardized. So as a result, sometimes things that are loans are kind of offered up as if it's going to be like a discount or free money. So an example I know we talked about the other day was one where a client of mine got offered a platinum financing package, because the school is afraid to be using the word loan because they thought it would be too scary.
Sure.
So again, your job is when you get these letters to figure out the stuff you do have to pay back and the stuff that you don't. When it comes to stuff that you don't have to pay back, make sure you understand the terms of it, because a lot of times it will be contingent, let's say on a grade point average. Yes, we'll keep giving you $5,000 or $10,000 a year as long as your child maintains a 3.0 or whatever it is. But sometimes schools engage in something called front loading, where they can offer you a scholarship as a freshman. And then all of a sudden you get the next year's and it's not there anymore. And then you get to that situation and you go back to your friend in the financial aid office and say, well, what happened to this scholarship? And they say, oh, that's only for freshmen. And now you were counting on that and now it's gone.
Yes.
So, and are you likely to pull your kid out of school? Probably not. So you just kind of, suck it up and deal with it.
And that's part of the emotion, right? This is an emotionally charged process.
Yeah.
And now you're getting back all these letters, all these forms. And if you're not taking the time to go through all these details, it could wind up costing you in the long run. Yeah.
It just makes you a better consumer if you're able to do all this digging all the way along, because there's lots of tripwires.
Yes, there's a ton of tripwires. How does this work for single parents or a divorced family? How should families in those situations navigate this process?
Yeah, when it comes to filling out financial aid forms, there are some special rules that relate to a single parent that folks should be aware of. In the FAFSA world, at least the way the rules are right this second, it is the parent who has had majority custody of the child over the last 12 months.
Okay.
And it's just their financial situation that goes on the FAFSA form. That's about to change for the ones that we're going to be filling out probably this coming fall. There, it's going to be driven by who's claiming the child on their tax return, which could be different. Okay. So this is something that if you're a single parent, you want to keep close track of, because this was a rule change that really just took place within the last year that they said was going to be effective for the fall of 23.
Okay.
We'll see if that actually comes to pass.
Okay.
But where if your child fills out just the FAFSA, but that's one set of rules. If your child is going to one of the elite private schools, oftentimes they will ask you to fill out a second form, something called a CSS profile. And that form will probably ask information about the non-custodial parent, the other parent, just so that they can see how much both parents can possibly contribute.
Okay. John, when my friends and I, again, we all have, younger grammar, middle school age children, but we kind of always say to ourselves like, oh, we're probably not going to qualify for anything. Or, I always hear people, even my husband and I do have a few friends who are putting kids through school and who kind of just state the fact, and they state it so factually and so confident, I'm not going to get anything. Is that always true? Or is it, kind of just a fixed mindset people have? Or if it is true, how should people like that handle this process?
Yeah. A lot of people, when they think that way, they're thinking more about just the need-based aid side. Okay. And it's very possible that they may not qualify.
Yeah.
Although we have seen situations where people with family incomes of $300,000 or more still can qualify for need-based aid, depending on their circumstance.
Okay.
But let's say they're not need-based aid candidates, but they're looking at schools that provide that type of tuition discounting I described earlier. They may very well, get some sort of financial aid, but if they don't fill out the FAFSA form, they may be doing themselves a disservice.
Okay.
So we always tell people to fill out the form because that FAFSA form can actually be an indicator to the school that money is an important decision tool for you to figure out which school they're going to. And if you don't fill it out, they'll assume that maybe perhaps you don't have the money as being a primary driver.
Yes. Or that the money doesn't matter.
Yeah,
so they can charge you whatever and you're going to pay it.
Yeah.
So filling out, so no matter what the situation is, fill out the form because your situation could change too at some point in the 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an important point because if you fill out the FAFSA and everything's all, sunshine and rainbows, and then next year, all of a sudden, I mean, we've all seen people through COVID lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And, if that happens to you while your kid's in school, the way that this college is going to be able to make the best possible judgment as to how they can help you is if they have that baseline good year on file so that they can see how your situation has changed.
That's great. And you also mentioned the college knowing what money means to you. So knowing that money's important to you through filling out the form, you mentioned they can track how long you spend on that part of the website.
Oh, yeah.
If you open their money-based emails, right? They can kind of track what your behaviors or values are around money.
All these people went to college, right?
Yes.
So they understand how all this stuff works. And so, they are really good at this whole concept is something called demonstrated interest.
Okay.
And demonstrated interest can go not only on the monetary side, but also on the, the curriculum or admission side where they can often track based on your web address, how long you're spending on the website. What are you looking at your emails? I mean, other things that go into that is, did you visit the school? That's very important. Did you go to a college fair? Did you fill out the card to win the free iPad or whatever? All those things go into the equation to see how interested you are. From a financial point of view, that's generally a really good thing to express interest because when it comes to offering scholarships of any kind, whether it's merit or otherwise, they really want to offer them to the people who are really interested in coming. And this is one of the ways that they judge it.
Oh, that is so interesting. Demonstrated interest. If anyone didn't write that down, write it down and understand it, that all of that matters.
It does. It does. Yeah, it really is. Even corresponding with, let's say, a professor that might be in your area of interest. All that stuff is often tracked. So if you've written a couple letters if you're interested in the math major and you to the head of the department, you've written some notes, all that helps. Yeah.
And you hear those things, but my mindset would be like, it's going to get lost in the shuffle or it's not really going to help, but it sounds like it really does.
No, there's a whole process that colleges use to make those judgments as to who's going to say yes if they offer admissions to. It's a concept called predictive analytics. And it's really a process where they, based on those activities, can judge how likely you are to come.
Oh, wow. Fascinating. Just fascinating. And how about like tax strategies or tax credits?
Yeah, the government does help on that front. There are a few tax credits that are out there that help. Probably the most well-known is something called the American Opportunity Tax Credit, where if your income is below a certain level, dependent on whether you're single or married, you might qualify for as much as $2,500 of tax reduction in each of 4 years while your child's an undergrad. So, $10,000 is $10,000, so that could be part of it. There are also other planning strategies that sometimes we employ for people who aren't getting need-based aid. It could be things like if you own a business, maybe having your child be employed by your business and then driving money to them that they can then turn around and use to pay for part of their college bill. It could be potentially if you've got this stock that maybe you've held forever that maybe grandma left you, that you said, well, I'm going to use this to pay for my kids' college. Well, sometimes it makes sense to even look at maybe gifting that to your child and letting them sell it because they may end up paying less tax than you. So if you can use the tax code beneficially, that can be part of the equation. And it can even extend over to the student loan side. I know loans are never that much fun to talk about, but selecting the right loan can make a huge difference in your future. Most of us are kind of trained to say, well, whatever the one with the lowest interest rate, that's the one I want. Okay. But the federal loan system has a whole raft of options to allow you to discount your loan payments down after you graduate and even have those loans potentially forgiven after a period of time that someplace like a commercial bank or somebody else they would have no chance of offering.
Oh, wow. We're going to have to do a total new episode on loans because that seems like an episode in and of itself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's right. I think where people's minds go is to loans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's lots of options there too.
This is incredible, but it all goes back to, for me, like my big takeaway here is just planning.
Yep.
Is that you are in more control of the process than you think you are. And looking at college as an investment, one of the largest investments you will make in your lifetime. And it deserves the time and planning as such.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if, like you have multiple kids.
Yes.
There's going to be several $100,000 going out the door, and to prepare for that properly just makes total sense.
Yeah. And it makes you gulp, right? I kind of get the lump in my throat thinking of that. But when I left our prep call, when I'm leaving this podcast, I do feel a little bit more hopeful on the process. If I could start early and kind of get ducks in a row here. So I hope our listeners feel the same way as well. John, just two things before we wrap up. You mentioned two resources that I wanted to make sure you talked about. One was collegedata.com.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that one earlier.
Okay. And Tuition Fit.
Tuition Fit. Yeah. And this goes to the information that you get on that financial aid letter and helping you interpret that and giving you a way to say, how am I doing compared to other people? Okay. Tuition Fit is a resource where some enterprising person put together the idea of being able to look at other people's similar, hopefully, better offers. So what they do for a small fee or potentially for free is to say, look, if you are willing to provide us names of a couple of the schools that you're interested in, we will provide you copies of aid letters that other people who have recently applied there and gotten accepted have received. So you can see young people who have similar academic backgrounds to you, see what they got.
Sure. So you can make sure you're not paying more than the average student.
Right.
What a great resource.
Yeah.
Well, John, this has been absolutely outstanding. Thank you for all this wonderful information. Thank you for all the educating and all the work you do in this field to help all of our young students go off to college. But I'm so grateful for having you on the show.
No, I'm glad to be able to share the information.
Oh, good.
All opinions expressed by the program participants are solely their current opinions and do not reflect the opinions their respective parent companies or affiliates or the companies with which the program participants are affiliated. Investments or strategies mentioned in this program may not be suitable for you, and you should make your own independent decision regarding them. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You should strongly consider seeking advice from your own investment advisor. Securities and investment advisory services offered through qualified registered representatives of MML Investor Services, LLC. Member SIPC, 6 Corporate Drive, Shelton, Connecticut, 06484, telephone number 203-513-6000.